Hi, I'm seas-Seeber, and this is part 3 of the final project, which is the wrap-up video. I will be utilizing PowerPoint for support in providing an inclusive, detailed presentation on the topic of conflict in the East China Seas. I'm going to turn off my camera to be better focused on presenting the slides. The area I focused on this semester studies has been a specific set of international conflicts. The first international conflict was a policy paper that was built on conflict in the South China Seas. And the reason for my interest in that conflict was there were some recent news reports about fishing vessels owned by Chinese government that were ramming other fishing vessels in the South China Sea. So I really became interested in what was causing that tension. And so I wrote a paper on the South China Sea conflict and found that that complemented the international relations focus of the semester. And in researching the international policies and laws that applied to the South China Sea conflict, that really kind of opened a door to continue to look at the potential for similar protracted conflicts where international law had the same kind of implications. And I really used that as my justification for looking at if there were other inflections that involved China as it related to their coastline. And turns out China has a series of tense events with Japan over debated sovereign territory in the East China Sea. And of course, I'm going to discuss specifics as I talk about mapping the conflict. But right now, the general points are that, number one, dynamics of international law as chartered by the UN Assembly is principally based on land control sea. And this is most likely derived from customary law of historical practices. In other words, territories were claimed and conquered versus bodies of water. Another general understanding is that international law languishes behind domestic law. And both of these points have proven to have unintentional consequences for China and Japan. Point two, the extent of resources between IGOs, INGOs, and SEOs is truly astounding. Though their resources do have maximum capacity, lots of times based on the capability to raise funds, it is truly amazing to read the depths of cooperative efforts. And in accordance with human needs theories, I support that by saying that a need can act as a motivational force. And so cooperative efforts are one way to work for security needs. The third point is realist theory is the framework for this project. Number four, I found out that mapping models are necessary to track conflicts effectively. Hocker-Wilmot assessment guide was very beneficial to me throughout the semester and was used often as a reference. Number five, international violence is often wrapped in structural violence first from states' policies that have been developed and international policies. They both can foster relative deprivation. Groups of people that feel disadvantaged are likely to lash out in harmful ways. And number six, that human rights should not be a subjective topic. Weaknesses and issues that are not addressed in this project topic are mass migration, terrorism, and civil society's involvement in the conflict. East China Seas conflict is heavily placed on structural violence, identity, human needs, and realist theory in action. The other weakness that in hindsight is glaring now is that the project depth of investigation and historical context of UNCLOS, which is the United Nations Covenant on the Laws of the Seas, and just briefly why under UNCLOS sovereign rights are categorized into 5 maritime zones, and each has a designated measurement and extent of exploration and exploitation that is allowed. More mapping of UNCLOS would have strengthened the analysis of this conflict. So a primer for discussing the conflict map. Conflict between China and Japan over the control and exploitation of the East China Sea and islands do have a global impact. As you see on the geographical map, the land areas bound the seas almost in a circular enclosure of chain islands claimed or mostly claimed by Japan. The conflict is centered on which country, Japan or China, has a legitimate right to exploit the natural resources in this sea. And to what extent will each military power of these nations push the limits of the maritime entitlements? This conflict is, as I mentioned, globally significant in that escalation could bring massive military actions to the region and destabilize the Asian Pacific. Moreover, both countries have the capability of using weapons of mass destruction. So the conflict map, the center point of the map is the conflict, which was designed to align with the geographical map that puts the East China Sea between the two countries. The major actors are, of course, the People's Republic of China and Japan. Russia and the U.S. are respectively noted, and the UN as influencing actors. And that is because China, via its support and cooperation, its support and cooperative alliance with China, and the U.S. in its alliance with Japan, and the UN as contributing to both sides, but also for international policy that has come out of the UN and the ramifications of that of international law. Other actors within each country were identified as contributing, and noting that the Japanese elections were just recently held, and that outcome may factor into the conflict. I've identified this conflict as negative peace because of the unresolved maritime disputes. Each major actor's interests and needs are identified. Both countries share many of the same needs and interests and motives. Significant differences are in China's need for hegemonic power in the Pacific, which is a manifestation of their nationalistic traits. And I am going to quote from the second lecture, China's guarantee of continued existence is necessary, and to preserve its distinct identity and to provide territory where the national culture and ethos are dominant. That all of that represents China, and that means that China, to confer political legitimacy, does this in a very nationalistic ideology. Keys are found on the next slide, and I'll go to that. And so there are 4 bubbles that represent the main issues. Both China and Japan want control of the East China Seas. The EEZ rules, which is the exclusive economic zones, and UNCLOS, which is international laws, they are creating structural conflicts for each nation. UNCLOS often finds their maritime claims are overlapping other EEZ areas, and where bodies of water are articulated due to land mass projections. So next down, there are 7 specific inflection points or confrontations of significance, and they are keyed and explained. And these happen over a period of time of 40 to 50 years. Resolutions that de-escalated the conflicts. There has been some attempts and there have been some successes, and those are noted in the green boxes. And I have used these specifically to add up to a net benefit, which is for potential behavior as defined by liberalism theory. 3 unpredictable dynamics are highlighted, and they are in yellow. And the one that is starred is noting the realist theory, which projects that if this conflict continues, that the U.S. will act in self-interest and enter the conflict. So what should be done for success? The spillover into U.S.-Russian politics should be carefully handled, and I believe that this is something that should occur at the UN level, at the yearly assembly. UNCLOS policy needs updating for territories that have articulated land masses. This international law was principally written as if countries had straight borders and therefore their territories were straight lines. And it is almost impossible to apply these designations in a configuration like China and Japan have. I am saying that this law is archaic and it has created a cherry-picking compliance situation for Japan and for China. And any issues that continue to come up between China and Japan, that these should be handled at the diplomatic levels of China and Japan directly. And that is where I have starred in blue. And I'm basing this on the fact that when there has been escalation, the points of de-escalation have occurred when there have been bilateral talks. And most notably is that the greatest common need by both Japan and China is for there to be stability in the Asian Pacific region, and particularly in those maritime waters. On another level, environmental groups, and I have a dashed line around fisheries, hydrocarbon deposits, and navigational waters. They are influencers, and they should continue their work for carbon neutrality and methane reductions while participating in and encouraging clean and renewable energy source uses, specifically by China because of China's quickly growing economic zone. China has made great strides in developing highly functioning and efficient mechanical systems which use less energy. Civil society organizations can utilize these systems in undeveloped countries, while at the same time pressuring China to reduce exploitation of natural gas in the East China Sea. Japan should continue its program to rid its dependency on nuclear energy and to convert to renewable energies. Japan should also increase their military spending as proposed and protect their fisheries. These actions proposed are intended to reduce the strain on the fisheries, to decrease the need for drilling and to promote trade in the navigational waters. Conservation of the East China Seas through bilateral talks are the most extreme of the suggested solutions that I'm offering. Setting aside areas within these waters is one way of promoting historical identity and finding a new common area for both countries to treasure. So I really appreciate the opportunity to go through the conflict map and talk about this international conflict. And I also appreciate the opportunity to have had a substantial amount of time to research this conflict, to learn more about it, to understand more about how international relations work. It's been a pleasure to present this material to you. Thanks and bye.